Shabbat Shalom. So a week ago, I landed in Germany for the first time. And as soon as I received my rental car and navigated my way out of the airport, driving a manual car for the first time in over 20 years, and set up my GPS, trying to, at the same time, sightsee a little bit, and try not to crash into the people next to me. The Lord began to speak to my heart and to open my spiritual eyes to the land. The first impression in the spiritual realm that I received while being in Germany was how much blood, how much Jewish blood was spilled in this country and because of the people of that country. Scripture says that the blood of Abel cries out. It cries out to God to come and do justice. And the Lord did. The Allies came and nearly destroyed all of Germany. And so people went on with their lives. Some perpetrators were caught. Probably the majority were not. And they try to rebuild their country and live with some semblance of decency. And so something called the veil of silence descended upon every person that had done terrible deeds and been involved in the worst human tragedy in history. Before the conference started, I arrived there on a Friday at 9 a.m. and the conference was to start at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. So I had a little time to rest and refresh myself and eat. I stayed with a wonderful, wonderful couple, an Irish woman and a New Zealand man, but they were wonderful, wonderful hosts, and they have been at the church that started the March of Life. They've been there or at least the husband has been there from the beginning. And he was married to a German woman from that same town, and she passed away, and he remarried the lady from Ireland. So they constantly were giving me background and information about how everything started and what had happened in this place and in that place, and corroborating a lot of what I know about the Holocaust. You could probably show me one or two documentaries or movies about the Holocaust that I haven't seen, but I guarantee you most of them I've seen them. And so I began to take in more and more of the place itself. We visited what we would call downtown, the old city, the old church, 1,000 years old, and the town square, the town hall, beautiful buildings, exactly what you would picture Germany to be like. And so we went to a a bookstore that the church owns right in that square, right across from the town hall, right behind the church. And we went down to the basement where they actually have a little bit of a museum. Not so much with artifacts, but mostly with pictures and writings. And I saw a picture there of exactly the same town square and town hall that I had just seen. But this picture was in black and white, and it was from the 1930s. And I saw the same town square and town hall in a dark light as the picture showed over 100 soldiers, 1930s, Nazi soldiers, in perfect uniform, perfect formation, in a profoundly dark version of that beautiful place. I began to notice the importance of place and what had happened in the different places. So I want to talk to you today about 4 spiritual principles that the Lord showed me about the place and the people during that weekend. And I want to read to you Matthew 12, if you would like to go there with me. Matthew 12, verse 43. I'm going to be reading in the New American Standard. We've all heard the saying that those who ignore history are bound to repeat it. I believe Yeshua is saying pretty much the same principle in these verses, beginning in verse 43. Matthew 12, 43. I think you can summarize this passage in that saying, how history is bound to repeat itself if you don't do something about it. Let's read together, verse 43. Now, when the unclean spirit goes out of a man, it passes through waterless places, seeking rest, and does not find it. Verse 44. Notice how we are talking about a man, and now all of a sudden we're going to start talking about a house. Verse 44. Then it says, this is the Spirit. Spirit says, I will return to my house. Did he come out of a house or did he come out of a man? He's calling it a house, right? I will return to my house from which I came, and when it comes, from which I came, and when it comes, it finds it unoccupied, swept, and put together, put in order. Then it goes out and takes along with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they go in and live there. And the last state of that man, now we're back to the man, the last state of that man becomes worse than the first. Notice how it ends. That is the way it will also be with this evil generation. The man is the same as the house, and it is the same as the generation. So let's talk about this house. Let's talk about this place. The first principle that I want to talk to you about is this: that the place of the old demonic activity can become the place of the new. The place of the old demonic activity can become, not always, but it can become the place of the new demonic activity. I call that territorial spiritual warfare. That's exactly what I noticed when I arrived there. That there is a spiritual warfare related to the places. That is why it's so helpful what Yeshua does in helping us compare, helping us see, understand this passage by comparing it to a house, a place in which demonic activity once took place. You see, the night of Kristallnacht, the night of the first open destructive attack on the Jewish people in Germany, that same night, the synagogue in Tübingen, the place that I visited and where this church is located and from which the March of Remembrance was born, that same night the synagogue was burned. By 1933, the University of Tübingen proudly proclaimed to be Jew-free. This is the place that I saw where the town square was full of the soldiers that will go on and commit atrocities against the Jewish people. Pastor Jobst, who started that church in Tübingen, a German descendant of Holocaust perpetrators, of Nazi activists and soldiers. He's done a little research and concluded that from all of the Nazi leaders and participants that came out of Tübingen, they are responsible for about 800,000 deaths. Just out of one town. That's a lot of demonic activity in one house, in one place. We're going to return to this territorial spiritual warfare, this principle of returning to the house, returning to the place of old demonic activity. We're going to return that at the end of our message. The second principle I want to share with you is that the evil committed by the fathers can return stronger in the children. The evil committed by the fathers can return even stronger in the children. This is a very similar principle than the first one. The first one relates to place. The second one relates to people, to generations. That's the connection Yeshua makes naturally in the passage. He tells us, I'm really not talking about a house. I'm really not even talking about individuals. I'm talking about an entire generation. An entire generation in Germany that went along for the most part with the atrocities committed. We know this as generational iniquities. I heard a young man who began by, I heard his testimony at the conference, he began by having terrible dreams, terrible nightmares. He would see himself killing people. He would see himself raping women, causing destruction. He came from a Christian home. He didn't know what to do with this. And one thing led to the other, and he ended up being a neo-Nazi. He actively became involved in that movement. And the Lord miraculously intervened and rescued him from it. And when he began to research what his great-grandparents had done, there's a law in Germany by which you can request and they will do a research for you and tell you exactly what your grandparents and great-grandparents did. Because you see, they kept very meticulous records of everything that every person did, because they thought this was going to be their greatness. So they wanted to document who done what. And so today, they're able to go back and I heard testimony after testimony of people talking about my grandfather, lovely old man, gave us candy, and when we would ask, what did you do during the war, grandfather? And he would say, I was just an office worker. And then they would do the research and realize that he had been in this concentration camp or been into Russia and into Ukraine, and some of them have found pictures of their grandfather participating in some of these things. And this young man was delivered from that. But we see the principle of how the evil things committed by the parents, the grandparents, the great-grandparents can return even stronger. I understand now that this is very much what's going on, not only in Germany, but in many other parts of Europe. The people that we see today in the news committing these acts of anti-Semitism are either related by generation, are either themselves descendants of perpetrators, and the deeds of the fathers are returning to this generation, or they are related to the land, to our first principle. Either there are immigrants who have come to Germany and to Europe, perhaps already with an anti-Semitic bent, but they have picked up the spirits that had been operative in those places. And it's coming back 7 times stronger. Matthew 23:29, Yeshua says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the monuments of the righteous, and say, if we had been living in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partners with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are the sons of those who murdered the prophets." That's the generational principle. In the last couple of weeks, there was an anniversary in the country of Iran, anniversary of the revolution. Benjamin Netanyahu said, "This may be your last celebration." But the country of Germany sent an official representative to Iran in occasion of their celebration of the revolution. So a country that is, in words, committed to never again, what business do they have in sending someone to celebrate the ones who are denying the Holocaust and calling for the destruction of Israel? The spirit of one generation can come stronger into the next generation. History is bound to repeat itself if we don't learn from it. The third principle the Lord was working to show me, it's very, very much the foundation of what they do at this church. But if they've grown into becoming almost like an activist church. Everybody is involved in this movement of the marches, and rightly so, because in a church of 300 people, 80% are descendants of Nazi perpetrators. 80%. Again, testimony after testimony. Worship leader. People in all levels of leadership. that have discovered the roots of their ancestors. There was one of the worship leaders who spoke of his grandfather, and his actually great-grandfather had been a pastor at the beginning of the century, written books, well-known, revered, showed a picture of him, and they were proud of him and kind of glad for the fact that they had nothing to do with the Holocaust directly. So this worship leader, I had seen him during the conference singing in Hebrew. He was even singing in Yiddish. I sat there speechless. It was amazing to just see these people. So he stands up and he gives his testimony how, his grandfather, great-grandfather, was a pastor, a theologian, author of books, and then they got into reading one of his books. And they showed the book on the screen and highlighted, and he was praising Hitler and seeing him as a kind of like a savior. But all of these things have a context. And for them, it was, they saw this as a good thing for them. And very deceived. And unfortunately, they prepare the way in the church, for most of the church, even the evangelicals, to support, to make way, to help people, to ease the conscience of people, even as all of these things were happening. So my third principle is that covering one's past keeps us in bondage to it. Covering one's past keeps us in bondage to it. That's what at the church they call the veil of silence. And so they have developed this seminar that they do called Breaking the Veil of Silence. How to help people begin a conversation about what their grandparents, the great-grandparents' involvement was during the war and during the Holocaust. There was a lady who discovered that her grandfather was an electrician, and he had come to work on the building of Auschwitz. And with tears in her eyes, she was asking forgiveness of the Holocaust survivors who were sitting right in front of her. That's the kind of stuff that this whole ministry is about. A pastor from the Ukraine, a non-Jewish pastor, he gave a testimony how even before he got involved with the march, he had taken it upon himself to go into town after town. I think he mentioned about 20 towns in the Ukraine. The Ukraine was brutal. In the Ukraine, they didn't even bother building any kind of concentration camp or any kind of crematory or anything like that. They would make Jewish people dig up their own graves and just shoot them right on the spot. And they would use really the anti-Semitism that the non-Jewish population already had, and egg them on to cooperate and participate. So this pastor would go in town after town, working in the local churches to give an expression of apology and asking for forgiveness for what every particular town had done. That's the model. That's the model of the marches. Place and generations. Two key components of that. but breaking the veil of silence. They have actually gone even further into this issue of breaking the veil of silence, into one area that I actually think is one of the best ways that we can apply this to our context here in the U.S. And that is that they have gone into helping churches and communities break the veil of silence of replacement theology. So they have gone into conversations about every denomination and the writings and the teachings and help Christians speak up about replacement theology within their own denomination. And I think there's a great application for us here in the States. This may be a way that we can make a difference and utilize what the marches are all about and make it into a practical application for people who may be wondering, why should I be involved in this? The fourth principle is that doing righteousness where evil was done keeps old demons from returning. Doing righteousness where evil was done keeps old demons from returning. Naturally, the demon realized the house is empty, it's clean, it's all set up for me to come. I think that's what's happening in Europe. They've dealt with it to a certain extent, and now the house is clean, swept, unoccupied. Even with all of the supersessionism and replacement theology that the churches have had, it can get worse. And it does get worse when the witness of the churches goes out, and as the churches in Europe are more and more falling away and going into a dark place, what's taking over is these spirits using the generations now to bring those old demons back and that demonic activity back. You know, in the lead up to the war in Germany and all of these other places, they will be proud that they had no Jews. They were cleansing the place out of Jews. They were throwing the Jews out of their countries. And they had begun by, in effect, boycotting Jewish businesses. That's what we have today with the BDS movement. The movement to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. What's different today is that instead of the Jews, is the country of the Jews. It's Israel. So whereas before it was don't buy from Jewish business, now is don't buy from Israel. And before it was let's get them out of our land and our countries, now it is they shouldn't even have their own country. They are occupying the land. It's the same demon, just in the 21st century. So this principle of doing righteousness where evil was done to keep away the old demons from returning, I think this has an application in what the marches are doing, which is to harness the power of symbolic acts, of going to Auschwitz, and right there in that awful place, bring the descendants of the perpetrators to ask for forgiveness of Holocaust survivors. The power of the symbolism is, you can't overstate it. You're going to have an encounter, a German-Polish encounter, in the same town in which the first time that that Hitler really invented an excuse to fire on the Polish. The town of Danzig. In that same town, they're going to have this encounter, this friendship encounter between Germans and Poles. Because you see, the Germans did a lot to the Poles. And it is so key for these Germans who have actually come to realize and come to the place where they can ask for forgiveness and love the Jewish people and love Israel. It is very helpful for the Polish to see that. It's very healing for the Polish to see that. So as a way of helping the Polish to take on the march, to go stronger in it, and to do the same, to apologize to the Jewish people for their part in it, as a way to model that, then the Germans are humbling themselves. Those who've come to this realization, they've humbled themselves to do that. Now, you know that the reason we're doing this, the first reason we're doing this, is to bring the march over to the Netherlands. And you see, the Netherlands is a case similar to Poland. They were invaded by the Germans. I met a lady who has one grandfather who was a Dutch hero. He was a member of the Dutch resistance. He was taken to a concentration camp, and he was murdered. And so in June, they're going to dedicate a plaque in his name to celebrate a Dutch hero of the Dutch resistance against the Nazi invaders. But her other grandfather was a German Nazi perpetrator. So this lady, she's the one who leads the seminar on breaking the veil of silence, on let's talk about this. So I met her, and you have to understand that you and I thought that I was the only guy in the world that had this brilliant idea to bring the march to the Netherlands. And we talked about this. We prayed for this. But when I arrived at this church in Germany, I found people after people, person after person, who have had the same desire to bring the marches to the Netherlands. They have business friends. They have relatives. They have ancestors who were actually Dutch. All kinds of connections. And for no reason, they can't explain why they've never done a march in the Netherlands. And so for me, it was quite amazing to realize here, little us are coming to this place, and we're bringing this conversation. Maybe we are naive enough to think that we can have the last push to make this happen. So when I met this lady with a Dutch grandfather and Nazi grandfather, and they explained to her what our intention was, what my intention is. She said, "Are you serious? Are you for real? Are you really going to do this?" Kind of like, "Don't you break my heart." I don't want to invest myself emotionally until you really tell me that you really are going to do this. And I assured her, yes, this is why I'm here. This is the only reason I'm here. And so we've actually decided on a date, June 28th. We've all concurred. I met with the international coordinator for the marches. Himself a businessman with many connections in the Netherlands, many business partners in the Netherlands, and knowing many believers. And and many churches that they know, all of their contacts, they are going to get in touch with so that we can have a meeting June 28th on the occasion of the dedication of this plaque to this Dutch hero of the resistance, so that we can everybody that is interested in bringing the march to the Netherlands is going to be there. My friends, my hosts from Germany, from Tübingen, they don't want to miss it. They want to be there. The leaders of the march in Ireland, they don't want to miss it. They want to come from Ireland just to be there at that meeting. They're going to get in touch with everybody they can. On my way home, I stopped in the Netherlands. I was there a couple days, met with Rabbi David. He is from the IMCS, from the MJAA, same organization that we are with. He's a Dutch. He ministers in Amsterdam. He knows all kinds of people. He knows everybody. He knows what's going on there. And we've decided we are going to all contact everybody that we can to be at this meeting, to launch this movement. We're not going to do a march. We're going to begin this conversation in the Netherlands to begin to organize the march. And we want to do the march in January of 2020. On the last Sunday of January is International Holocaust Memorial Day. And so everybody has concurred this is probably the best time, most significant for the Jewish community in the Netherlands and internationally. We haven't even tapped on the Israelis. You realize that Israelis are incredibly excited to see this. There were three main speakers at this conference. One is the relations manager for the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, Yad Vashem, speaking at this conference in a church. The other one was a Holocaust survivor who is a survivor of the Exodus. How many of you know the Exodus? The ship that was not allowed to enter into Israel, and when they sent back to Germany. And this man, he was an 8-year-old boy, and they finally made it. There's a whole movie, you can check it out. You can look for this movie, The Exodus, with Paul Newman. It's incredible. Great movie, yes. And so it depicts us. He was one of the speakers there. And then the other one was a member of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. He handles the relationships with Christians and evangelicals. And he said something extremely significant. He said it's like the Christians and Jews are climbing the same mountain from opposite sides, and they can't see each other, but they're climbing the same mountain. Amen. For a Jew to say that, that is amazing. Of course, you know who is at the top of the mountain. Yes. But what we found is, and what I think is the most significant for us as a congregation, is that dealing with the issue of the Holocaust that translates into today's anti-Semitism in boycott of Israel and all of that, dealing with that is the best and most effective way to demonstrate to the Jewish people, we love you. To demonstrate to Israel, we are serious. We stand with you. We are serious. I spoke to Adam. Some of you know Adam. Adam comes here to visit sometimes, an Israeli man, searching his way into Yeshua. And I told him what I was going to do in Germany, and he couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. I called him right before I boarded the plane, and it was You really are doing this. You guys are something else. You see, this speaks like nothing else, to be able to truly care, to know you care without any agenda. Because you get nothing out of this. We have an invitation, and I want to pass along this invitation to you. I'm going to conclude with this. We have an invitation to be part of a march that is going to happen at, I believe it's in April. I'll get you the dates. In College Station. I know, I'm not an Aggie either, but it's about remembering the Holocaust. So I met the lady who is in charge of the marches for Texas. She is the daughter of Holocaust survivors, and her rest of the family perished in the Holocaust. They are from Hungary. She is from Hungary. But a full-blown Texan, and she lives in Houston, and she's very excited to know us, to know who we are, and she wants us so much to be a part of this. So she wants us to, she wanted me to pass along this invitation, and of course she's a true Jew. You know, she wants to seal the deal. So are you going to bring a bus with you? Are you going to, how many people are in your congregation? Well, I think half of them at least need to come down to College Station and be part of this march. And you know, the government, there are government officials from the state of Texas who are supporting this march. This is not a small thing. This is a huge thing. Next year she wants to do another one, the next one at SMU. And she already has the contacts to do that, and not only from churches but even from the Jewish community. So I'll give you more details, and this will be a Sunday towards the end of April for some of us to just take a trip together and go down to College Station and be part of that march. So, the Lord is delivering into our hands a gift completely ready. Some people have sown, some people have watered, and now we are to come in and collect this harvest. To begin this movement in the Netherlands. To be a congregation of influence. To insert ourselves into the history and the story of the world after the Holocaust. And speak and raise our voices against anti-Semitism today. We see it all over the news every day, all over Europe. What we have is powerful. The prayer movement that we have, the worship that we have, the word that we have. This is powerful. This is meant to be given to the nations, and we're doing so. We're taking this to Europe and raise our voices in Europe. Make a difference. Amen. This house needs to be not only cleansed and ready, but it cannot be empty. It needs to be filled with worship, with the word, with righteous people. Amen. Amen.